How do you build a third of a mile-long tunnel that stretches farther than 5 football fields under a city without anyone noticing? With lights, fans, oxygen masks, and silence. This wasn't a cave, it was a secret highway, carved by men with a plan and nerves of steel. What were they after, and how close did they get? You're about to find out. Have you ever wondered what lies beneath a bank vault? What if someone spent months digging their way toward it? Carefully, patiently, secretly? That's exactly where this story begins. Not with an alarm, not with a chase, but with a silent idea. An idea worth millions. Brazil's bustling cities see all kinds of money move each day. Armored trucks roll out at dawn, picking up and delivering the currency that fuels businesses, pays workers, and supports entire regions. But few places handle more raw cash than the Banco do Brasil branches connected to currency distribution hubs. One such facility, tucked behind an industrial zone in São Paulo's outskirts, became the silent target of one of the most ambitious plans Brazil had ever seen. Why this bank? Why that branch? It wasn't just about luck or location. That building, unlike ordinary banks, handled enormous quantities of real paper money. Not digital numbers, not ledgers, but piles of physical bills waiting to be transferred to banks, companies, and government offices. The vault inside didn't just hold savings, it held supply. The estimated cash inside hovered around 1 billion reais, roughly $300 million at the time. No security guards on Earth could look at that without feeling the weight of what they were protecting. Every heist starts with a question. The question here was simple. How do you reach that vault without setting off a single alarm? No front door breach, no shootout, no masked men demanding keys. Instead, a plan emerged to let gravity and time do the work, one scoop of dirt at a time. By all appearances, the industrial strip near the bank looked ordinary. Fenced properties, modest warehouses, and narrow streets lined with delivery trucks and motorcycles. But a closer look, had anyone paid attention, might have raised a brow or two. One rental property in particular had curious patterns. Men entering with shovels, exiting without them. Long hours behind closed metal doors. Lights glowing well past midnight. All of it seemed just believable enough. So who were these people? Not loud criminals or thugs flashing weapons. These were men who wore work boots, jeans, and dirt-streaked shirts. They introduced themselves as workers fixing the property for a future business. Neighbors might remember the story changed slightly each week. "We're building a car repair shop," one said. Another claimed it would be a recycling center. Yet no signs went up, no customers came by, and no permits appeared on the door. Inside, a different story unfolded. Blueprints of sewer systems and underground cables lined the walls. Measuring tapes curled on tables next to high-powered lamps and dusty food wrappers. These weren't ordinary criminals. They were planners, designers, and diggers. And at the heart of it all was their goal. The vault under Banco do Brasil, just a few hundred meters away. Why risk so much? For one reason, opportunity. Unlike digital theft, which can be traced or reversed, cash theft is instant and silent once complete. If they succeeded, no computer logs would blink, no hacker trails would matter. Just bags of unmarked bills disappearing into the night. It's not just about the money, though, it's about the odds. A frontal attack on a federal vault is suicide. But if you can reach the vault from below, if you can do it without triggering vibration sensors or motion detectors, if you can bypass security with nothing more than sweat and strategy, then you've beaten the system without firing a shot. Of course, not every plan starts with such bold ambition. Maybe it began with just one man, one idea, one glance at a street map and a question. What if the tunnel began here? What if we could rent that spot without suspicion? What if we could keep digging without anyone hearing us? But digging isn't quiet, and it isn't clean. How do you remove half a kilometer of dirt without drawing eyes? Where do you put it? Do you bag it and drive it out? Do you mix it into construction waste and haul it as renovation debris? Every scoop became a puzzle. Every day a balance between progress and paranoia. And while they dug, the vault stayed where it always was. Silent, solid, filled with a fortune that few had ever seen, let alone touched. Some say the hardest part of any heist isn't the crime, it's the waiting. And for these men, each meter forward was a test of discipline. One wrong noise, one curious worker next door, one phone call to the wrong agency, and it could all fall apart. But still, the tunnel moved forward. Lights were strung along wooden supports. Ventilation fans hummed softly to keep air fresh. Rails were laid to slide carts of dirt back and forth. This was not chaos. It was methodical, quiet, and terrifyingly close to brilliant. But remember, We're still in the beginning. The cash hasn't moved. No sirens have wailed. The vault remains untouched for now. And yet, just above it, a storm brews quietly beneath the floorboards. What would you do if you knew millions sat just meters away, protected only by concrete and silence? Would you keep digging? Would you turn back? Would you trust the others in your crew not to talk? The goal wasn't just to get rich, it was to do it invisibly. And somewhere under the streets of Sao Paulo, men risked everything to make that dream real. Later, things will shift. Later, decisions will matter. But for now, the plan grows deeper, inch by inch, toward a silent prize that has yet to know it's under attack. So stay with us, because what happens next changes everything. Have you ever looked at a small warehouse and thought, this place is hiding something? Most people wouldn't. That's exactly why the crew picked it. The point of entry didn't need to look smart, it needed to look boring. Nothing says, ignore me, like a dusty rental behind a gas station. That warehouse was the front door to a plan months in the making. Tucked in Sao Paulo's northern industrial sprawl, the building sat behind a black iron gate, its walls bare, its sign blank. Nothing moved out front but garbage bins and a half-bald dog. Yet inside, the quiet buzz of drills and generators told a different story. This was no gang of hot-headed crooks. They weren't in it for thrills. This was cold, patient, professional work. The men who rented the place introduced themselves as construction contractors. They brought ID, signed a lease, even paid 3 months' rent in advance. They showed a building permit, probably fake, and told the landlord they planned to open a recycling company. And then they vanished behind the gate. Every day, trucks came and went. Cement bags, wood planks, plastic barrels, ventilation tubing. Nothing illegal, but all strangely out of place for a business that never opened its doors. At night, low voices and electric hums drifted from the walls. Neighbors chalked it up to long renovation hours. In truth, those nights built the foundation of a tunnel that would reach 500 meters across the city's underground veins. The crew wasn't huge, maybe 15 men at most, but each played a role. The leader stayed mostly out of sight, checking maps, managing schedules, and dealing with the money. The diggers worked in shifts, 6 hours at a time. They wore construction gear, used headlamps, and followed markings taped along the floor like a subway path. Then there was the engineer, someone with real knowledge, not just street smarts. He had blueprints of the area's sewer and electrical systems, measured depth from street level, and calculated slope to keep the tunnel from flooding. He knew when to reinforce the walls and when to let the soil settle on its own. Without him, the whole thing could have collapsed in a day. You may ask, how did they meet? Who brought them together? The answer may never fully be known. In jobs like this, names are temporary, promises are verbal, and trust is traded like currency. What mattered was skill, not background. Some had criminal records. Others were first-timers lured by the cut promised at the end. They kept quiet. No bragging, no bars, no girlfriends told. They parked their cars several blocks away and walked in. Cell phones stayed powered off inside. Communication ran through paper notes and silent gestures. When someone made noise, they were warned once, then replaced. What kind of men do this work? The kind who think 20 years in prison is worth one big score. The kind who dig through hot, cramped dirt chambers for 6 months just for the hope of one payday. The kind who live on instant noodles, sleep on concrete, and still show up each night because the prize is real and close. Their warehouse didn't stand out from above, but inside, it had everything. An air filtration system made from hacked bathroom fans, a pulley lift to carry carts of dirt, thick wooden beams to prevent collapse, and an underground room where stolen tools were cleaned and stashed. They even installed security cameras, not to keep police out, but to watch each other. Why all the secrecy? Because they were sitting on a fortune without walls. No guards, no alarms, just a plan and the silence of the street above. If someone talked, the entire operation died. If one worker slipped up, they'd all go down. So they kept digging. No one saw them, but the city carried on above their heads. Children walked to school, delivery trucks rolled by, and shopkeepers swept sidewalks. Beneath it all, these men crawled like shadows toward something no one else could see. What would you do in their shoes? Work 10 hours in darkness for a chance at wealth most men never touch? Trust strangers with your freedom and your life? Some people would never risk it. Others would never walk away. They didn't laugh much. They didn't celebrate progress. Each meter was crossed off like a prison calendar. They measured oxygen levels, checked for gas pockets, and timed their rotations to avoid exhaustion. And slowly, the point of entry became sacred ground. A space where money, madness, and patience fused into one dangerous ambition. Above ground, the city slept. Below, the tunnel grew. And behind it all, the quiet little warehouse stood unnoticed, its gate always shut, its secret getting deeper each night. The men knew they were getting close. The walls began to hum faintly with electricity. They were near the vault's perimeter. Tools changed, schedules tightened, and tempers thinned. A slip now could cost everything. But they weren't done yet, and neither is this story. Because what comes next isn't just about soil and shadows, it's about how close they came and what stopped them. Stay with us. The final turn is just ahead. Have you ever felt the weight of the earth pressing in from all sides, knowing one wrong move could bury everything? That's the world these men lived in day after day. For them, the tunnel wasn't just a means to an end, it was a living creature they had to build, feed, and control. And if they failed, it would swallow them whole. This tunnel, beneath the streets of Sao Paulo, wasn't a random dig. It was planned down to the meter. It had structure, technology, and precision. And while it didn't look like a subway or a mine shaft, it came close. The difference? No safety inspectors, no blue uniforms, and no second chances. They began with a descent shaft in the warehouse, 2 meters wide, 4 meters deep, reinforced with concrete rings and metal bars. It was the tunnel's throat, a vertical entry point with a welded ladder bolted to the side. The floor was covered with plywood, and the shaft itself was capped every night with a removable steel plate hidden under wooden pallets. Once underground, the space opened into a crawl tunnel. Tight, claustrophobic, barely 1 meter high. It ran straight for the first 20 meters before widening into something more functional. By the 50-meter mark, the team had carved out enough space for crouching movement and began laying the first rails. Yes, rails. Actual metal strips welded into place and set on wood blocks spaced every half meter. On these rails ran 2 makeshift carts, built from wheelbarrow frames modified with ball-bearing wheels to glide smoothly. The carts were guided by a simple pulley system near the entrance, operated by one man hauling cables through hand-built pulleys mounted to the tunnel sides. The tunnel was lit by a continuous chain of industrial LED work lights, wired into a master breaker inside the warehouse. Electrical cords ran the full length of the tunnel, clipped to nails and hooks to keep them off the floor and away from water. Power was regulated through surge protectors, and a small generator served as backup in case of outage. Ventilation was critical. The crew installed a dual fan system, one pushing fresh air in, one pulling stale air out. These fans were mounted in wooden crates filled with soundproofing foam to muffle the noise. Flexible ductwork, similar to dryer tubing, snaked through the entire tunnel, suspended from hooks driven into the wooden crossbeams. Speaking of beams, those were placed every 80 centimeters. They used pine lumber treated with flame-retardant paint, purchased in bulk under fake contractor licenses. Vertical support posts held the sides from caving in, while crossbeams above created a rigid frame. Metal braces reinforced weaker sections, especially near soft clay zones where the earth shifted more easily. Water intrusion was another major concern. Sao Paulo's underground carries moisture, especially during rainy seasons. To combat this, the crew lined portions of the tunnel with thick polyethylene sheets, stapled into the wooden walls. They also installed a simple drainage trench, a shallow groove cut into the tunnel floor, to channel water toward the entrance, where it could be pumped out using a portable submersible pump attached to a hose system. Communication underground relied on a wired intercom system. Walkie-talkies didn't work well with thick soil and concrete above, so they ran insulated cable to wired speakers, letting workers talk between the tunnel and the warehouse with a push of a button. Code words were used in case someone was listening. At the 200-meter mark, they hit their first major obstacle, a layer of broken rock and old concrete debris. Progress slowed for days as they brought in electric hammers and chisels. The sound was risky, loud, sharp, and hard to contain, but they worked only between 2 and 5 a.m., when traffic noise above masked the vibrations. As they moved forward, they left behind a trail of markers, numbers spray-painted in fluorescent green, tracking every 5 meters. Next to each marker, they placed a steel hook for hanging tools or lights. They also stored emergency air masks every 50 meters, just in case gas leaked or fans failed. The tunnel wasn't just a passage, it was a system. Each shift was tightly scheduled. 6 hours on, 6 hours off. One crew dug, another hauled dirt, a third handled maintenance, checking lighting, fixing rails, testing ventilation. Meals were simple: packaged sandwiches, water bottles, instant coffee heated over battery-powered stoves. Breaks were brief, always inside the tunnel, heads against the walls, knees pulled to chests. Every night, dirt was bagged in thick construction sacks labeled scrap. The bags were hauled up the shaft, loaded into trucks, and dumped at remote lots the team rented under aliases. Over the course of 3 months, they moved over 200 tons of earth. Quietly, carefully, and invisibly. The deeper they got, the higher the stakes rose. Air grew thick, sweat rolled off skin constantly, dust clung to lungs and teeth. One man suffered a minor collapse scare. Soil broke through a wall seam, and it took 2 hours to dig him out. He returned to work 3 nights later, silent and pale. And yet they pressed on, not because they enjoyed it, but because they were too far in to stop. The map said they were getting close. The pressure changes in the tunnel confirmed it. At around 480 meters, the team began switching from heavy digging to fine-tuned chipping. They knew the vault's wall was near, and they couldn't afford a single error. Everything rested on timing. The tunnel had to be finished just as the vault was at its fullest. Too early, and suspicion might kill the plan. Too late, and the money would be gone. So they waited for the final night. Just one more push, a few more meters, and they'd breach into the belly of one of Brazil's most secure vaults. But for now, the tunnel breathed on. The lights flickered, the carts rolled, the fans hummed. And above them, Sao Paulo carried on, blind to the secret racing just below its feet. Next, the moment approaches, the day they risked it all. Don't blink, the final turn is almost here. Have you ever stood on the edge of something massive, only to feel it slip through your fingers at the very last second? That's what the final night felt like. Everything, the planning, the digging, the sleepless months underground, had led to this moment. One more shift, a few meters left, and they'd be inside the vault. But fate has its own tunnel, and sometimes it bends without warning. The last week of digging had been different. The soil grew thinner, dustier. Faint vibrations from the bank's machinery pulsed through the ground, telling the crew they were close, closer than ever. Even the air felt warmer, drier, like the kind you'd expect near underground electrical systems or a vault's climate control. They sharpened their tools. Steel chisels, a diamond-tipped cutter, and a modified hydraulic drill they'd rented under a false name. Their final goal was to pierce a section of reinforced concrete, about 40 centimeters thick. They weren't going to blast it. No explosions, no cracking tools, just slow grinding, shallow scoring, and silence. That night, the crew split into 2 groups. One below, one above. The tunnel team would start the breach. The surface team prepared masks, bags, and carts for the haul. They had practiced this final sequence dozens of times, like a fire drill in reverse. Enter, grab, retreat, vanish, all within 30 minutes. The warehouse was quiet. The trucks were parked 3 blocks away, covered with tarps and black license plates. Burner phones were charged, bags were pre-labeled, and changes of clothing were stacked in crates. It was all ready. But something shifted above. Not inside the tunnel, not within the crew, but from forces they couldn't see. Across the city, a different team had been watching. You see, banks don't just rely on guards and alarms. They rely on patterns, data, noise levels, heat signatures, and someone somewhere had noticed something strange. Power surges at odd hours, cellular silence in a zone that used to buzz, complaints of faint mechanical sounds after midnight. Police began to look, not in panic, not loudly, but quietly, with long lenses and unmarked cars. They didn't know exactly what they were looking for, until they did. 3 days before the breach, a detective assigned to a financial crimes task force noticed something odd during routine patrol. A warehouse that always had lights on, yet never opened. No deliveries, no signage, no activity in daylight. And then, security footage from nearby shops revealed something stranger. Men entering late, never carrying tools back out. Always walking, never driving, always silent. That's when they moved. The morning of the last dig, an undercover team in plain clothes approached the warehouse posing as inspectors. When the door opened slightly, they saw the ladder descending into the floor. The rest happened fast. They didn't raid with sirens. They didn't announce themselves with bullhorns. Instead, they quietly sealed the exits, blocked the street, and slipped inside. What they found stunned even seasoned officers. 500 meters of tunnel, supported with wood, lit end to end, with ventilation, tracks, wiring, and a clear path aimed directly at the Banco do Brasil vault. They followed it carefully, step by step, crouching under beams, tracing markings, breathing the stale air the diggers had lived in for months. But the crew wasn't there. They had taken the night off, partly to rest, partly to check timing. Luck or caution had saved them from being caught red-handed. Still, the scene told everything. Fingerprint kits came out. Photos were snapped. Evidence bags filled with notes, gloves, tools, and food wrappers. And when news broke, it spread fast. Across Brazil, across Latin America, across the world. A tunnel half a kilometer long, discovered just days before the largest cash heist in Brazil's history could have occurred. In the days that followed, arrests came slowly. Some of the crew had left town, others had burned their documents. One was caught trying to cross a river with forged ID, another turned himself in quietly, lawyers already in place. But most were never found, and the money, of course, remained untouched, because it had never moved. Imagine the frustration, to get that close, to touch the edge of a fortune without a single bullet, without a siren, without a scratch, and still fail. The crew had done everything right. Planning, digging, building, waiting. But one thing they couldn't control ruined everything. A neighbor's complaint, a flicker on a bank sensor, a detective's hunch. The tunnel was sealed. Concrete poured into the shaft. The warehouse padlocked and later demolished. Official reports declared it a success of early detection and interagency cooperation. But the story didn't end there. Some say the mastermind disappeared into the countryside. Others believe the entire operation was financed by a larger criminal network, testing the waters for future jobs. One thing's certain, the tunnel still exists, if not physically, then in legend. The blueprints are gone, the bags were never filled, but the silence of that final night still echoes through Sao Paulo's underworld. So ask yourself, how would you feel, standing just one wall away from a fortune, your hands shaking, your heart pounding, only to hear boots above and realize it's all over? Would you run? Would you fight? Or would you vanish into the shadows, leaving behind the greatest heist that almost was? Somewhere, someone knows the answer. But they're not talking.